We love to think of ourselves as living in the golden age of progress, but let's face it, modern society has some glaring issues. From widespread pollution to income equality down to the mistreatment of children, the problems are as endless as they are depressing. I'm Mike with List 25, and trust me, this list will have you questioning if we've really come that far. 25. Biodiversity is disappearing. Fast. Have you noticed how as a kid you'd see tons of butterflies flying around, but now they're pretty much gone? Well, it's because we're fast losing biodiversity. You see, we're losing animals and plants 1,000 times faster than nature intended, with over 1 million species of plants and animals on the verge of extinction, and 68% of our overall global diversity already lost. What's causing all this? Mainly, our modern activities. Deforestation, climate change, overexploitation, and habitat destruction. But to be honest, this isn't just about losing cute animals or exotic plants. I'm talking about the collapse of ecosystems that give us food, clean water, and breathable air. If we keep this up, we're not only going to ruin the balance of nature, but our very own survival may be in jeopardy. 24. Women are still victimized every day. By now, violence against women should be a thing of the past, but sadly that's not the case. Estimates from the World Health Organization show that about 1 in 3 women worldwide, around 30%, have experienced physical and or sexual violence from an intimate partner or non-partner in their lifetime. Most of this violence comes from intimate partners. In fact, nearly 1/3 of women aged 15 to 49 who have been in a relationship report being violated by their partner. Such violence can cause lifetime trauma. And breaking the cycle of abuse is tough, as many women face stigma, fear of retaliation, and a lack of support. 23. Loneliness is the silent killer. You'd think with all of our gadgets and social media we'd feel closer than ever, right? Nope. Loneliness is exploding, especially in wealthier countries. A study from the American Psychiatric Association found that 30% of adults feel lonely at least once a week, with 10% stuck in that feeling every single day. What's really worrying is that being socially isolated can actually lead to early death. It's a health risk on par with smoking or obesity, yet it barely gets the attention it deserves. Brazil tops the list for loneliness, with a lot of people feeling isolated regularly. Sure, tech helps us stay connected, but where are the real face-to-face connections we're all longing for? 22. Healthcare inequality is a death sentence. Access to healthcare should be a no-brainer, but millions are dying without it. In 2023, 5.6 million people in low and middle-income countries lost their lives because of inadequate or no healthcare. That is over 15,000 deaths every single day. Worse still, in these countries, the poorest people end up spending 9 times more of their income on health costs than the wealthy, thanks to income inequality and underfunded healthcare systems. Meanwhile, wealthier countries have a healthcare system that saves millions of lives. If struggling nations could reach the same healthcare standards as places like Cuba or China, they could save countless lives too. 21. Your data is up for sale. There are more than 5 billion of us online, generating billions of gigabytes of data daily. Convenient? Sure. But here's the catch. Our privacy has become a goldmine. From browsing habits to private conversations, our personal data is being harvested, sold, and weaponized for profit. Big tech, advertisers, and even governments are cashing in, all while we unknowingly trade our privacy for convenience. The scariest part? As the digital world continues to evolve, we gradually lose control over our own lives. 20. Corporate lobbying. Profits over people. We don't consider this a lot, but it actually has a huge impact on our lives. Every year, billions of dollars are poured into lobbying by corporations, labor unions, trade associations, and other groups. In 2023, lobbying spending hit a record high of over $360.6 million. What does that mean for us? Tax breaks for the ultra-rich, deregulation of harmful industries, and public health policies that are anything but public-focused. While they rake in profits, we're left dealing with the fallout, polluted air, unsafe food, and healthcare crises. It's a rigged system, and the rest of us are just along for the ride. 19. Gadgets are our new addiction. You've probably heard this 1,000 times while scrolling on Instagram. and it still doesn't change much. But think about it. The average person spends 5 to 6 hours a day on screens, and that's excluding work-related tasks. For teens, add about 2 hours to that. And it's not by accident. Apps and platforms are designed to exploit your brain. Every notification or like triggers a dopamine hit, making you crave more. A recent study by one poll shows that over 70% of people admit to feeling FOMO, the fear of missing out, which keeps them glued to their screens, even during a face-to-face conversation. The cost? Rising anxiety, depression, and sleep disorders, all while rewiring our brains in ways that mimic substance addiction. We think of it as convenience, but it's actually a profit-driven trap that's damaging our mental health. 18. Automation is displacing millions of jobs. Honestly, I'm not trying to scare you. So let's look at it together. In recent years, automation has really shaken up the job market, changing industries and how we work. With the rise of automation and AI, millions of jobs are being taken over by machines. A study by McKinsey suggests that automation could displace up to 8 million jobs by 2030, which is about 1/5 of the global workforce. You can really see this change in areas like manufacturing, transportation, and retail, where robots and AI are taking over more and more jobs. We can definitely argue that automation creates new types of jobs and that more people should get on board with this change, but honestly, on a global scale, only a small number of people have the skills or are in the right position to make that shift. For them, I say, God have mercy. 17. Water scarcity affects billions. I bet you didn't know that over 2.2 billion people currently don't have access to clean water. And by 2030, we could face a situation where water demand is 40% higher than the available supply. Climate change is making droughts worse, and with pollution and more people around, we're running out of water pretty quickly. This water scarcity has led to fights over resources in places like the Nile and the Tigris-Euphrates rivers. Without clean water, diseases like cholera spread rapidly, and food production is at risk. Farming alone uses 70% of the world's fresh water. We'll need sustainable management, conservation, and international cooperation to address this. Hopefully, we get to tackle it before it's too late. 16. Environmental degradation is escalating. Did you know that over 8 million tons of plastic waste hit our oceans every year? That's a ton of trash, creating huge garbage patches that suffocate marine life and mess with ecosystems. Our oceans are gasping for air, with over 500 dead zones where sea creatures just can't survive due to pollution. And it gets worse. Industrial fishing is draining our fish stocks, with 1/3 of the world's fish being overexploited. But it's not just the oceans that are in trouble. 1/3 of the world's soil is now degraded, mainly because of industrial agriculture, deforestation, and climate change from burning fossil fuels. This makes it harder for the land to support crops and absorb carbon. It's easy to overlook these problems when we're caught up in our day-to-day lives, but the damage is really stacking up. Meanwhile, air pollution claims 7 million lives annually, half from household pollutions tied to fossil fuels. The damage is piling up, threatening ecosystems and our survival too. 15. Only 9% of plastic gets recycled. Let me guess. You think a lot of the plastics from our water bottles, food containers, and shopping bags are recycled and disposed of properly. Unfortunately, no. According to OECD, only 9% of this plastic waste actually gets recycled. The rest? It's piling up in landfills, clogging drains, and creating those huge garbage patches in the ocean. But it's not just an eyesore. It's a serious problem for ecosystems everywhere. Every year, over 8 million tons of plastic end up in the ocean, harming marine life like fish and sea turtles. This is a serious threat to biodiversity and a growing environmental crisis. If we don't cut back on single-use plastics and improve waste management, it's only going to get worse. 14. The Ads Epidemic. In the 19th century, encountering an ad was rare, maybe a newspaper notice or wall poster. Now, we are bombarded with thousands of ads daily, from digital pop-ups to colossal billboards. Advertising isn't just about selling products anymore, it's about shaping our desires, habits, and even self-perception. The $700 billion spent globally on ads in 2023 wasn't just about selling, it was about manipulating emotions, planting insecurities, and fostering desires we didn't even know we had. It's overwhelming to realize how much of our behavior is influenced by carefully crafted stories designed to steer us. But apparently, we don't mind what they make us think as long as it's delivered to our doorstep. 13. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for American children and teens. This is terrifying. For the third straight year, gun violence has overtaken car accidents as the leading cause of death for kids and teens in the US. In 2022 alone, 3,500 children lost their lives to gun violence, and countless more were injured. These aren't just statistics. They're lives cut short in school shootings, domestic disputes, and accidental firings. Despite widespread outrage and calls for reform, no significant action has been taken. It's a grim reality where parents worry if their kids' school day could end in tragedy. Until substantial changes happen, this crisis will continue to threaten the safety and future of America's youth. 12. Around 25% of Americans avoid seeking medical care. 1 in 4 Americans avoid seeing a doctor. Not because they don't want to, but because they can't afford it. Even with 91% of adults insured, the cost of healthcare often makes treatment inaccessible. Simple routine checkups, life-saving interventions, or even prescriptions can lead to financial ruin. A $400 bill is unimaginable for 37% of Americans, and 21% skip prescriptions due to cost. In the wealthiest nation on earth, millions are forced to choose between their health and their financial stability, highlighting a deeply flawed healthcare system. 11. 40% of US adults are obese. Obesity is no longer just a health concern, it's a full-blown national crisis. Today, over 40% of American adults are obese, a staggering rise compared to less than 10% in the early 90s. What's even more alarming is the sharp increase in childhood obesity, exposing kids to diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart conditions once thought to affect only adults. Obesity also takes a toll on mental health, fueling depression and stigma. The financial burden on individuals and healthcare systems is enormous. 10. Cyberbullying contributes to rising self-unaliving rates. You might say, it's just online, it doesn't matter. That's not true. Cyberbullying is a real crisis. Current data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that 14.9% of teens and young adults report online harassment. Some mean people just sit behind screens and ridicule others. The victims of this treatment sometimes feel trapped, lonely, and overwhelmed. It gets so bad that they may even consider taking their own lives. This is very serious. One study in Britain shows that half of the self-unaliving events among teens and young adults are caused by bullying. I mean, come on, people are going through a lot. And if you can, be nice, or a bit more constructive in your criticism. That's a pretty cheap way to make the world a better place. And yes, before you flood the comments, I get it. Unaliving is a stupid and not serious enough word to use when talking about this topic, but blame the YouTube algorithm. Us YouTubers get penalized if we use the actual word, so this is the loophole. We here at List 25 are in no way making light of these types of situations. 9. The fast food industry contributes to poor health. Like I said, over 40% of US adults are obese, with fast food being a major factor due to its high sugar, fat, and sodium content, increasing risks of heart disease and diabetes. But that's not all. The industry is equally damaging our environment. Livestock farming for cheap meat contributes 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Single-use plastics and non-recyclable packaging generate millions of tons of waste annually, with 8 million metric tons entering oceans each year. Additionally, unsustainable farming practices drive deforestation and biodiversity loss. While promising convenience, fast food imposes staggering long-term cost on public health systems, ecosystems, and climate stability. If you ask me, that's a negative on all sides. 8. Air pollution kills over 2.5 million people annually. According to the WHO, air pollution kills over 7 million people every year. Tiny particles like PM 2.5 and harmful gases from vehicles, factories, and burning fossil fuels cause serious health problems, including lung disease, heart attacks, strokes, and cancer. Over 90% of people worldwide breathe air that's considered unsafe, with cities being the most affected. Pollution from burning fossil fuels makes up 65% of these harmful particles. Studies now show it also shortens global life expectancy by 2.2 years. Tackling this problem with cleaner energy, better public transport, and stricter pollution rules can save lives, improve health, and reduce the massive costs linked to air pollution. It's a crisis we can't afford to ignore. 7. We're trading sleep time for extra screen time. Screens are coming for our health. According to a Nielsen report, adults on average spend 11 hours a day staring at screens, far more than the 7 to 9 hours of sleep experts recommend. This constant screen time messes with our sleep. Blue light from devices blocks melatonin, the hormone that helps us fall asleep. Studies show that 90% of people use screens right before bed, making it harder to sleep. The result? Poor sleep, tiredness, and bad moods. In fact, millions of people around the world suffer from sleep problems. Well, the irony is clear. We stay glued to our devices for connectivity, but it's ruining our ability to rest and be productive. 6. More than 1 billion people live in slums. Right now, over 1 billion people around the world live in slums or slum-like conditions in cities, and that number is expected to hit 2 billion in the next 30 years. These people don't have basic stuff like clean water or decent sanitation. These crowded, rundown areas are hotspots for disease and poverty, making survival a daily struggle. Bad housing, messy waste management, and a lack of healthcare create a perfect storm for sickness and hunger, trapping entire communities in tough situations. They say home is where the heart is, but for over 1 billion people, it's where hope tries to outshine the darkness. 5. The digital divide is growing wider every day. It's the 21st century, and we're living the dream with digital gadgets as our ever-ready minions, fulfilling every command at the tap of a screen. But here's what we often overlook. Not everyone shares this luxury. According to a UN study, 2.7 billion people are still offline. In rural areas and low-income communities, access to the internet and modern tech is a rare privilege. This digital divide isn't just an inconvenience, it's a barrier to education, job opportunities, and even healthcare, locking millions in a cycle of inequality. Now, keep in mind that we live in a capitalistic world. And this is not a simple issue because internet providers are pretty much only going to invest in tech-poor areas if there's something in it for them. So this isn't a quick cash grab. If there's going to be a solution to this, there has to be a lot of forward thinking involved. 4. The homeless crisis is getting worse. In many wealthy nations, homelessness is now a full-blown systemic crisis, not just a street-level issue. Rising house costs, stagnant wages, and mental health issues have caused a perfect storm. As a result, homelessness is rising in cities worldwide. In the US, it rose 12% to a record high. Soaring rents made housing unaffordable for more Americans. On a single night in January 2023, over 500,000 people were homeless in the US. This is more than just a lack of shelter. It's a matter of survival. People are living without basic necessities like clean water, healthcare, or safety, with little to no access to shelters or social services. 3. The average American has more debt than ever. Debt has become a part of everyday life for many people today, especially here in the US. The average American carries around $104,215 in debt, which includes mortgages, auto loans, student loans, and credit cards. Mortgages make up the biggest chunk of this average debt. In fact, American household debt has hit a staggering $17.987 trillion in the first quarter of 2024. This heavy burden is really hurting financial security and trapping a whole generation in instability. Interestingly, many Americans focus on paying off debt as they approach retirement, and those over 70 tend to keep their debt balances low. For those under 30, the largest source of debt is actually mortgages. 2. Social media worsens body image crisis. Social media platforms can really fuel comparison and self-doubt, especially among young people. Sites like Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat often promote unrealistic beauty standards, which can lead to serious self-doubt. With all those filters and perfectly edited photos, it's hard not to feel like being normal just isn't enough anymore. In fact, studies show that 40% of teens in the US worry about their looks because of social media. Many are also chasing validation through likes and comments, which can really mess with their self-esteem. Here's a surprising fact. Over 7% of young people in the US are at risk for exercise addiction due to heavy social media use. But with the obesity crisis we're facing, is that really a bad thing? No. I guess it's better to be motivated for the right reasons rather than feeling shamed into it. 1. A single mistake could trigger nuclear war. Nuclear weapons are the deadliest tools on Earth, capable of wiping out entire cities and leaving lasting damage to the environment and future generations. Yet, in today's world, we often don't think about them. But they're still out there. The UN confirms that there are around 12,500 nuclear weapons worldwide, and despite efforts, disarmament is a struggle. Only 2 nuclear weapons have been used in war. But the reality is, one mistake or accident could spark a nuclear war with catastrophic consequences. Maybe it's time we start thinking about this much more seriously. And that's a wrap for today. But don't worry, that was just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to jaw-dropping discoveries. If you're craving more mind-blowing facts, be sure to check out our video on 25 weird facts that sound made up, but aren't. Did you hear that we just made the world's first psychopathic AI? That's crazy, right? Things are really gonna get weird. And have you ever wondered about the mystery of Hippo's pink sweat? Trust me, you don't want to miss it. So click on the link right here to watch it, and I'll, wrong hand, catch you next time.